In this video series, we'll delve into the biblical timeline of history. We aim to uncover the significance of important historical dates, such as the creation in 11,013 BC, the flood in 4990 BC, and even the date when God would bring judgment upon the house of God, the churches, as mentioned in 1 Peter 4:17. We'll also explore the date of Judgment Day, which is also alluded to in the same verse. And you might be wondering what the biblical timeline of history is and why it's important to learn. These dates weren't placed in the Bible arbitrarily. They serve a purpose beyond mere knowledge. God always has a reason for concealing truths within the Bible. These essential dates are not explicitly stated in verses, but require meticulous exploration through comparing Scripture with Scripture, the biblical method for revealing truth, mathematical analysis, and ultimately guidance from God's Holy Spirit. So what exactly is the biblical timeline of history? It's a timeline that spans across the Bible, beginning with the first book, Genesis. This timeline then extends into subsequent books and chapters. Why should we invest time in learning about the biblical timeline of history? The answer can be found in Ecclesiastes 8:5. Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil thing, and a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. To comprehend the current time or season, understanding past biblical events is essential to understand when future events will occur that the Bible is prophesied about.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Timeline of History. Sorry that we're late. We had some technical issues with the audio on Brian's end. So we're just going to go ahead and begin. This is episode number 20. Let me check. 23. Yep. So Brian's just going to pick up where he left off.
Okay. So I want to double back on something that I touched on last week, but didn't go into depth. And we're going to look at Luke chapter 2. Let me share the screen real quick. You guys can see the screen? The Bible verses?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So we're going to read Luke 2. I'm going to go through verses 40 to 47. And it's on the right in the yellow. That's a good size?
Yeah, that works.
All right. So Luke 2, verses 40 to 47. And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with the wisdom and grace of God was upon him. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the day, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Now, I've introduced certain key concepts in this timeline series. Examples of this would be Kerasem, or the idea of accession versus non-accession years. It could also be described as inclusive versus non-inclusive, or calendar years versus actual years. We also introduced the concept that kings can be co-regents, and the reign of a king can be said to begin when he became co-regent with his father or when he became a sole ruler. Well, today I'm introducing a new concept, which is absolutely critical to understanding the finer points of the timeline. Now, anyone who has been listening to eBible for any amount of time knows that we can't trust the secular definition of a word to be that's what it means in the Bible. And we must let the Bible be its own dictionary and define its own words. So in secular society, when we talk about a day, our day begins and ends at 12 midnight. And normally we get up in the morning, we go to school, we go to work, whatever it is we're doing. We have lunch at noon or, in the early afternoon, then, morning, afternoon, traditional workday, 5 o'clock in the evening, you go home. You have your evenings, you do, whatever you do in your off time, you go to bed at night. That's the end of the day. You wake up the next morning and it starts all over again. So that's the 24-hour day in the secular world. However, that's not how the Bible works. Each day begins and ends at sunset. Excuse me. And God established this right in the first week of creation in Genesis 1. I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to start in verse 5. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Now notice, evening comes first. So the biblical 24-hour day, a day could refer to the light period of the day, or it could refer to the entire 24-hour period. So the 24-hour period begins at evening, and then morning, or the day portion of the 24-hour day, follows. And we'll skip down to verse 8. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And again, evening, then morning follows. And we'll go down to verse 13. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And if we go down to verse 19, the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And if we go down to verse 23, and the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And if we go down to verse 31, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So God established in the very first week of creation that the 24-hour day begins with evening, which is in contrast to everyday secular society, where we assume that the 24-hour day begins with morning, or I guess technically at midnight, but we wake up in the morning and that's effectively the start of our day. But in terms of the Bible, it starts at evening or sunset. Now, just to refresh your memory, let's go to Leviticus 23, 5-8. In the 14th day of the first month at evening is Jehovah's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread. Unto Jehovah 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. But ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Jehovah 7 days. In the seventh day is an holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work therein. And so here in when it's talking about the 15th day of the month, this is the fifth, like today, this is being recorded on October 6th. So this is the sixth day of the month. Now here, this is 15 Nisan, the 15th day of the first month. Now here, when it's talking about the first day, it's not talking about the first day of the month, but rather it's talking about the first day of the Passover, which would be the 15th day of the month. And here, likewise, when it's talking about the seventh day, it's not talking about the 17th day of the month. It's talking about the 17th day of the Passover, which would be, I believe, the 21st day of the month. The 15th day of the first month is also the anniversary of when the Exodus took place. And to prove that, we will look at Numbers 33:3. Numbers 33:3. And they departed from Ramesses in the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. The children of Israel went out with an high hand in the sight of the Egyptians. So just to go through the timeline a little bit, the Passover lamb was killed on the 14th day. The blood had to be sprinkled on the doorpost before sundown, which is to say, the blood had to be on the doorpost before the sundown, which ended the day of the 14th and began the day of the 15th. And the angel of death would have passed over the Hebrew houses on the evening portion of the 15th day. And remember, the evening is the start of the 24-hour day period in the Bible. And then after the angel of death passed through in the evening of the 15th, then in the morning or in the day part of the 15th, which followed the evening part of the 15th, that's when the Exodus took place. And that's why here you'll read on the morrow after the Passover. So again, the Passover took place on the evening of the 15th, and then they would have left in the morning or in the day portion of the 15th, which followed the night portion of the 15th. So anyway, I plan to discuss the Passover and the Exodus in much greater detail when going over the timeline concerning the cross. But for now, I just want to introduce these concepts slowly, kind of get them in the back of your mind so you're a little more familiar with them. And some of you might be wondering why I keep on saying 15 Nisan rather than just saying the 15th day of the first month. And the reason I'm doing that is, for example, every Gregorian month has a name. So we start off the first month is January, the second month is February, March. This is being recorded in October, which is our 10th month, and we go to December, which is our 12th and final month. Well, the biblical months also have names. And if you go to the Hebrew calendar converter, you'll see that that they do have names. And sometimes those names on the calendar converter match the names that God gave them, and sometimes they don't. But in this particular case, it does match. And to prove that the name of the first month is Nisan, we'll go to, let me share the screen again. Or is it on? No, I guess it's still on the Bible study. We'll look at Esther 3:7. In the first month, that is the month Nisan. I always want to say Nisan, but it has one S, not two. Nisan. That is the month Nisan in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus. In the first month, that is the month Nisan. So Nisan is the first month. In the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot before Haman, from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, which is the month Adar. And the month Adar, that would be the 12th month, or in the case of when you have a leap year, unlike Gregorian leap years where they add an extra day, in biblical leap years, they add an extra month. So in the case of a 13-month year, a leap year, the 12th month would be called Adar 1, and the 13th month would be called Adar 2. But anyway, now God also gives a second name for the first month, and this is the only month that I'm aware of where God gives two different names to the same month. And in this case, you can read Exodus 13:3 and 4. excuse me, Exodus 13, verses 3 and 4. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand Jehovah brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out in the month Abib. I'm not sure if the correct pronunciation is Abib or Abib, but God also defines the month of the Passover, which is the first month. That is both the month Nisan and the month Abib or Abib. And Lord willing, at some point in the future, I plan to go through the names of all the months. But for now, this will suffice. So historically speaking, the feast began, and we're talking about the Passover feast when Christ was 12 years old. And let me just go through that quickly, because we went through this at the beginning of the timeline series, but so this is mathematics. So you go from, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But in the case of the Gregorian calendar, there is no year 0. And so if we're starting with Christmas, which is in 7 BC, we can count 13 accession years, or 13 non-inclusive years, or 13 actual years. So we'll start here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Or we can do inclusive years, or non-accession years, or calendar years. And we'd start here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So by that way, depending on which, and God uses both methods of counting. So you could say it was either 13 years later or 14 years later, despite the fact that Christ was only 12 years old, or 12 and a half, actually. But going to the Hebrew calendar converter, if we go to March 20th of 7 AD, you can see here, this is 15 Nisan, the 15th day of the first month. And this year is wrong because they didn't understand when the world was created. They didn't understand the Kerasem doctrine, just like James Ussher and the corporate churches didn't understand when creation took place. Let me get rid of that. But this is the date when the Passover would have began, and it's a 7-day feast. So the last day would have been 6 days later. So it would have started on Tuesday, March 20th of AD 7. 6 days later, it would be Monday, March 26th of AD 7. And you can see this is 21 Nisan, and this would be of the year 11,019 EA. And 3 accession days later would be the 3 days later when they found him, which would be 3 non-accession days. So this is the last day of the feast. So presumably the day after is when Mary and Joseph would have left. And 3 accession days after the feast, 3 accession days after the last day of the feast, 3 non-accession days after the day when Joseph and Mary left. This would take us to Thursday, March 29th of AD 7, which would be 24 Nisan of the year 11,019 EA. And Mr. Camping, in his earlier writings, for example, if we go to this is Time Has an End, and this was written in 2005, right here. And this is, we are almost there. And almost there. And this is the August 2010 version. And in his earlier writings, Camping says that Christmas was on October 7th, October 1st of 7 BC. And in his later writings, he said it was October 2nd. And the, let me just pull that up real quick. Page 208. So this is the earlier writings, and he talks about Jubilee year, October 1st of 7 BC. And this, if you're in the PDF, it's page 208. If you're looking at the physical paper, it's page 216. And we are almost there. We'd have to look at page 35. And so if you're looking at the PDF, it's page 35. If you're looking at the physical copy, it's page 27 down here. And here it's talking about the Jubilee, October 2nd of 7 BC. So here he says October 1st. In the later writings, he says October 2nd. When we look at the calendar converter, Saturday, October 1st of 7 BC, and you can see this is 10 Tishri, which is the day of Jubilee or the Day of Atonement. And to prove that, we'll go and look at Leviticus. (25) 9 to 13. Leviticus 25, 9 to 13. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the Day of Atonement shall ye make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. So this is the Day of Atonement. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. Ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth of itself, nor gather the grapes in it of the vine undressed. For it is the Jubilee, it shall be holy unto you. Ye shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. In the Jubilee of this year shall ye return every man unto his possession. So again, up here, it talks about the 10th day of the 7th month. Verse 9. Yeah, 10th day of the 7th month. And here, October 1st is the 10th day of the 7th month. If I say October 2nd, now it's the 11th day. If I hit after sunset, now it's the 12th day. So the Hebrew calendar converter seems to agree with Mr. Camping's earlier writings. But it also makes sense because this is when Christ came into the world and began his 40-year demonstration of how he atoned for the sins of the elect from the foundation of the world. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, is it possible that we could have a converter that actually has the correct year and fixes the errors? And I actually did that a couple years ago. And right here, I have a quick comparison. If you look at Christmas, 10th day of the 7th month of the year 11,006, October 10th of 7 BC. And then I'm comparing it to when Jesus was found in the temple, 24th day of the 1st month of the year 11,019 EA, or March 29th of 7 AD. And this gives a breakdown of the number of days between them, inclusive and non-inclusive, the years. And again, you see 13 and 14 years, even though he was 12 or 12 and a half years old. Here again with the biblical years. And if you look at the days, I thought this was really interesting. The number of days inclusive is 4,563, which breaks down to 3 cubed times 13 squared. So 3 times 3 times 3 times 13 times 13. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought the number of biblical months, 154, 2 times 7 times 11. I thought that was very interesting. Now, to verify this 4563 number, the rules for the Gregorian calendar for here match 2,000 years later. So 2,000 years after 7 BC would be 1994. So if we go to October 1st, I'm just going to open a new spreadsheet. I don't know why it's not letting me just open a clean one, but let me just make this 200. So October 1st of 7 BC, 2,000 years later would be October 1st of 94. And 2,000 years after Christ was found in the temple would be March 29th of 2007. And if you take the difference between these two, you'll see it's 2562, which is what I have here. And then if you add one to make it inclusive, you get 4563. So you can check some of these things on your own. If anybody wants this spreadsheet, I'll be happy to make it available publicly. But and I've discovered some interesting things in here. For example, we go change this to 73 and 83. What? So here I'm comparing the cross to Judgment Day. So the cross took place on the 14th day of the 1st month of the year 11,045, which would be Friday, April 1st of AD 33. And Judgment Day was on the 17th day of the 2nd month of the year 13,023, May 21, 2011. And if you count the number of days between them, 722,500, 5 times 10 times 17 times 5 times 10 times 17. And, so I did double check that these things do work. But anyway, one other timeline I discovered, which I thought was pretty interesting. If you go, and I did briefly go over this with the kings. If you look at Second Chronicles 15, 9 and 10, and this is in reference to Asa, who was the first saved king of Judah. And he gathered all Judah and Benjamin and the strangers with them out of Ephraim and Manasseh and out of Simeon, for they fell to him out of Israel in abundance when they saw that the Jehovah God was with him. So they gathered themselves at Jerusalem in the 3rd month, in the 15th year of the reign of King Asa. So if you go back to the timeline, the 15th year of Asa, the 15th accession year of Asa, Asa's right there, corresponds to 896 BC, or 10,117 EA. And thought it was interesting, 51 and 64. And here again, you don't know the day. I just guessed it to be the 6th day, because that's the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Pentecost. But it's the 3rd month of this year, 89 BC. And if you go to Christmas, which again would be the 10th day of the 7th month of 7 BC, you'll find it's 11,000 biblical months between those events. And if I change this to an 81, if I compare it with the 23 A's end, first day of the 7th month of the year 13,006, September 6th of 1994. If you look at the number of years, you'll find it's 20 inclusive. It's 2890, which is 5 times 2 times 17 squared, so 10 times 17 squared, which is interesting. And just to do the quick math, if you take 896 and you add 1994, and it's inclusive because you're not subtracting one for your 0, 2890, and and here again, 2890, 2 times 5 times 17 squared. So I don't know. I just find it very helpful. But one thing about Jesus is, if we go back to Mr. Camping's writings, in his earlier writing, he says that Christ was baptized on September 25th, and that's on page 339. Here he talks about September 25th of 29 AD. And if we go to his latter writings, page 46. Here he talks about September 6th of 29 AD. So here again, he changes from September 25th in his earlier writings to September 26th. And this would be 1 Tishri, and that's based on Numbers 29:1. Oops. And in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work. It is a day of the blowing of trumpets unto you. And we know that blowing in a musical instrument, particularly a trumpet, has to do with sending forth of the gospel. And this is when Christ began his ministry. And if we go back to the calendar converter, if we go to September 25th of AD 29, we'll find that that corresponds to the 1st day of the 7th month. And if we make it the 26th, which is his later writings, now it's Tishri 2. I'm not sure why he changed it, but I just wanted to point that out. Now, Christ was born either on October 1st or October 2nd of 7 BC, which means if we were going to go by the Gregorian calendar, that means that he would turn 35 on October 1st of 29 AD. But if he was in fact baptized on the 25th, well, 1 day is 26, 2 days is 27, 3 days is 28, 4 is 29, 5 is 30, 6th is October 1st. So it actually would have been 6 days shy of his 35th birthday, according to the Gregorian calendar. Whereas if we look at the biblical calendar, Christ was born on the Day of Atonement, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. Now here, the baptism took place on the first day of the 7th month. So he was born on the 10th day of the 7th month. And here he's baptized on the first day of the 7th month, which means that he would have been 9 days short of his 35th birthday, according to the biblical calendar, as opposed to 6 days short if we look at it from Gregorian metrics. All that said, though, if you take the year 7 AD and you add 22 years, that'll get you, if you take 7 and you add 22, you get to AD 29, which means that from AD 7, when he was found in the temple, when he was 12 or 12 and a half years old, to the year he was baptized in 29 AD, that would be 22 actual years, 23 calendar years after AD 7, when he was found in the temple. And in case you're wondering what the name of the 7th month is, now in this case, for some reason the Jewish calendar calls it Tishri, but that's not the name that God gives it. If you want to know the name that God gives it, you'll see that in 1 Kings 8:2. And all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto the king Solomon at the feast in the month Ethanim. I'm not sure if that's correct pronunciation. Ethanim, which is the 7th month. So every Jewish calendar converter that I've seen calls the 7th month Tishri, but God defines it as Elitham, which is H0388. So just wanted to let you know that. Going back to we're going to start in Matthew. To 1. And we went through word for word the Luke account of the Christmas story, and it used the word babe, which does not appear in the Matthew account. We read about angels and shepherds, But there was no mention of a star, there was no mention of wise men, and there was no mention of gifts in the Luke account. In the Matthew account, it says, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of the Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem." Now here, notice it says there's wise men, but it doesn't give a number. At no point does it say there were three of them. It just says wise men. And if we look at this in the Young's, for example, that it? And Jesus, having been born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, lo, mages from the east came to Jerusalem, which again would remind us of Matthew 16:19. It says Jesus having been born. And if we go to Matthew 16:19, and this is in the Young's, this is not the King James, "And I will give to thee the keys of the reign of the heavens, and whatsoever thou mayest bind upon the earth shall, having been bound in the heavens, and whatsoever thou mayest loose upon the earth shall, having been loosed in the heavens." And if we want to read it in the King James, "And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in the heaven." And so I see a parallel here. So when it says when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, it doesn't mean that it was at the time he was born. It's just making reference to a past action. Just as here in Matthew 6:19, it's making a reference to the past action of whoever Christ, paid for, whoever Christ had drawn himself, because the prior action is on Christ's behalf in terms of salvation, not us. And I also pointed out in Genesis 30:25, "And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob had said unto Laban, Send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to mine own country." And when we looked at this in the past, this was not right after Joseph was born. This was when he was weaned at the age of 3. And going back to Matthew, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes and the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art now not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had called the wise men, when he had privily called the wise men, and here again, it does not give the number of wise men, it only says that there were wise men. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And remember, he demanded to know where the Christ would be born. And they said, in the land of Bethlehem and in the land of Judah. Well, how did they know that? Well, we know that they knew that probably because of what we read in Micah 5:2. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, Yet out of thee shall come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. So, and we know that only God is from everlasting past. And so in Bethlehem Ephratah. And let's look at verse 8. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also. Now, here again, this word young child is G 38:13. And I want to compare that to the Luke account. And we'll go to Luke 1:41. And then this is in reference to the unborn John the Baptist. And when it came to pass, when Elizabeth heard the salutation of Mary, the babe is G1025, as opposed to G38:13. This is a different word. The babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Ghost. And verse 44, and again, this is in reference to the unborn John the Baptist. For lo, as soon as the voice of thy salutation sounded in mine ears, the babe, G1025 versus G38:13, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. And we also see this word babe used in reference to Jesus himself in chapter 2 and verses 12 and 16. And this is in reference to Christ, not John the Baptist. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe, G1025, wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. And again, in contrast to G38:13 that we read in Matthew. And verse 16. And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe, G1025, lying in a manger. And this word G1025b, G1025, does not appear in the Matthew account of the Christmas story. As a matter of fact, it doesn't appear in the book of Matthew at all, as far as I can tell. We'll go back to Luke, starting in verse 9, Luke 2, verse 9. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And remember, the Luke account said nothing about wise men, gifts, or a star. And also, so far in the Matthew account, we haven't read anything about angels or shepherds. But notice the star went the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. So this would seem to indicate to me that the star was moving. I always pictured it as a stationary object in the sky, much like, for example, sailors back before we had modern technology might have followed the North Star to guide them across the seas. It's a stationary object in the sky. I always assumed that this would have been a stationary object, but it appears that it was moving. And it reminds me of Exodus 13.
Hey Brian, it's where I'm at it's 3:59, but where you're at it's almost 8 o'clock, or 7 o'clock. So
Okay, well,
to...
let me just read that these two verses then. Exodus 13, 21 and 22. And Jehovah went before them by day in a pillar for a cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and by night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of the fire by night from before the people.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. In about a few minutes, we'll start the panel, or shortly.